Hi and welcome to Intrepid Wisdom. My name is Deborah J, and on today's episode we have Rory Kilmartin. Rory is a relationship researcher who's been fascinated by relationship dynamics since he was 12 years old. Years of research has led him to specialising in both power dynamics and archetypal dynamics, and he's been designing and leading workshops where he shares his research and findings with people for over 16 years. So you're so welcome, Rory.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's great to be here.
So we connected a couple of years ago. You had actually been doing, I think it was Invitation to Love at the time. And I remember watching a video and I just was like, this guy really knows what he's talking about, because I think sometimes we can come at relationships from a very surface level. And actually what you had done is you had gone back years before and had done loads of research and study about what is a relationship, what makes a relationship, what's the role of each person in a relationship. And I just found it really, and it was a free YouTube video, and I found it so informative. And I actually went back and applied it to my own relationship, and I found immediately it was actually starting to make differences. So I'm really, really delighted to have you here today. And just maybe to give people a little bit of a background before we kind of jump straight into it, maybe you can just tell us, you started looking at this when you were 12 years old.
Yeah, I thought everybody was, until I realized I was the only person that I knew. I just remember being 12 and making up my mind that I was never going to love somebody the way I saw people loving each other. Like I could see that something didn't make sense. What I witnessed was people said they loved each other, and then I witnessed them being very cruel to each other. And as to a sensitive young boy that I was, like, this made no sense. Like I could feel the violation of it all, you know. So I think on some level, I just made up my mind, like, I'm gonna not do that. Therefore, I have to figure out how not to do it, and began this endless fascination. I think some people fall in love with cars or marine biology, or they want to be vets, or they want to be pilots. I have a friend whose son wants to be a pilot. It's it. He's totally fascinated by everything aviation. So for me, I just wanted to figure out love. And here I am, and I still find it this astonishing inquiry. And let's dive straight into Intrepid Wisdom. So for me, the full potential of love and the full potential of life itself are two sides of the same coin. I think there are three primary games in life: the health game, the money game, and the relationship game. And they're primary because we cannot opt out of those three games. You can choose to be an entrepreneur or not. You can choose to be a parent or not. You can opt out of family. You can opt out of religion. You can not be academic. There are numbers of games that you are optional. But the health game is not optional. You have a biological body. It responds via feedback. And there's nothing you can do about that. The health game is involuntary. And relationships also. But what I observed is that you can find people who've cracked the health game that you probably wouldn't want to have dinner with, because they're not actually that nice. And you can find people who've cracked the money game who you actually wouldn't want to have dinner with. But I've never met anybody who's cracked the relationship game that I didn't want to sit down and have a drink with and talk to them about life. Because to crack the relationship game, you kind of have to master yourself, essentially.
Beautiful.
But you can win the health game and not master yourself. You can still be utterly deluded and win the health game. But you can't be utterly deluded and win the relationship game. That doesn't quite work. So I'm waffling a bit, but I kind of see it like
it's lovely. Like it makes absolute sense as well. Like I think you had mentioned something as well in one of your videos, and you had said, and it really, really resonated with me. You said something along the lines of, once you can understand that it's a privilege to be part of somebody else's life and watch them grow, it makes a huge difference. And I felt for me that made a huge difference for me, but that also has to start with yourself. So you can't, as you say, it's a two-way system. You have to work on yourself first. And I know from previous relationships, when I've applied this understanding, actually when you do start from yourself, it's really weird. The relationship will actually change. So quite often I think we're so like invested in this person needs to be a particular way. They have to change, they have to do this. And we've all these really huge expectations on other people, but actually we need to step back from those expectations and start with ourselves first. So you have the archetypal system, and you've got the different kind of characters within a relationship. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, happily. So let me go back one step to what you were saying. So I've done two major pieces of research in my career so far. The first in my 20s essentially was models of relationship. It was essentially, I observed people who really struggled in relationships had an underlying set of beliefs, principles, and assumptions that led them to relate a certain way, which leads to the behavior and the consequences that make life miserable. And then I also observed upon interviewing people that the people who've really mastered relationships, who have a mostly beautiful time, have a different set of underlying beliefs, principles, and assumptions about themselves and the art of relating, which leads to different behavior and different reactions and a different experience, which is typically beautiful, typically. So it's really at the underlying foundational level of belief. And you touched on it earlier, which is, if you believe that you own someone and that they should do what you expect them to do, that's going to lead to a certain set of behaviors, because the psyche has to resist that eventually. No one can play the role that you prescribe to them for 40 years without acting out. And then when people start acting out, it's this great eruption, this great break in everything, particularly trust. The people who enter someone's life like it's an astonishing privilege, and that they have this opportunity to be a benevolent force, to have benevolent intent in someone's life, and that they don't own them, that rather they exist inside this opportunity, no matter how long it lasts, whether it's a lifetime or not. Their behavior is different, their thoughts are different, they speak differently, they listen differently, and they're interested in the magnificence of the person they're in a relationship with. The people who essentially think that they own each other are looking for the failings. It's a very punitive approach to life. So that was the first major piece of research, and it's under my work, which I call the Invitation of Love, and it is essentially the nature of the art of relating, essentially. The second major piece of research I did in my life was accidental. I observed that my life didn't work. I had figured out a huge amount and I really thought I cracked it. And then I found myself sort of swept overboard in the ocean in the dead of night, all alone. And I realized that my life didn't work. And I knew that I had to solve this problem and that my life couldn't continue until I solved this problem. And the headline for me was, I kept giving my power away. I knew how to love beautifully and I was capable of it. And yet somehow people were showing up poorly in my presence. So there was a major mystery. I didn't know what the answers were. I didn't even know what the questions were. I just knew my life didn't work. And I went to my mentor and began this inquiry. And it very, very, very quickly, almost in the very opening sentences, we began to realize that I was coming out with answers that were pointing. I was coming out with answers that he had been seeking for many, many years and unable to find. And we very quickly determined that his how he relates to life is totally different to me. What his values are, how he reacts, what triggers him, what makes him feel comfortable, what makes him feel reassured, they're totally different to me. And essentially, we discovered archetypal differences inside of our, not desperate, but fully committed need to figure these problems out. He was desperately trying to figure things out for his own reasons. I was trying to save my own life. And we discovered essentially what we call the survival archetypes. And we were both looking at breakdowns. John Gottman, he's probably the world's most respected relationship researcher, something that I concluded, which is the grand skill in all relationships is dealing with breakdowns. You could be, dealing with breakdowns and reconnecting after a breakdown. You could be the best lover, the best at earning money. You could be an amazing conversationalist. You can be fantastic at creating dates. You can be domesticated. You can be amazing. But if you can't reconnect after a breakdown, it's a disaster. It's a disaster. It doesn't work. And also, if you're bad at breakdowns, if you escalate breakdowns, if you prolong breakdowns, if you XYZ breakdowns, if you're not competent with them, it's a disaster. And breakdowns happen. Everybody has to deal with stress. So we were looking at breakdowns and we discovered the survival archetypes inside of an inquiry into breakdowns. And then we later discovered the work of Moore and Gillette and the classic conversations about archetypes, but they only go so far. What makes, I think, my research unique is that I'm a relationship researcher studying breakdowns that discovered archetypes because I was looking at imbalanced behavior. So, and then it's like the full enormity of archetypal wisdom became clear. And for those people who are listening, if you're listening and you're not familiar with the term archetypes, very simply, Jung described them as universal psychic structures. What we mean by that is a structure of the psyche universal to everyone. Deborah, me, you listening to this at home, and everybody you know. And these universal psychic structures are essentially the sovereign part of us, which is the external world, left brain, leadership, systems, planning, workability, the working of the household, the village, the family holiday, getting to work, the kids doing their homework, the food on the table. It's the workability of life itself and the system that everybody has to fit into. The warrior archetypal energy is the energy inside all of us that gets stuff done. It's the doing energy. It's the protecting, moving, action, driving. We've got to pack up the house. We've got to move these boxes. We've got to get out of bed and feed the baby. It doesn't matter what it is. It's the energy that gets stuff done. It's also left brain, external world. The difference between the warrior and there's a number of differences between the warrior and the sovereign energy. And one of them is that the warrior energy is more interested in the integrity of individuals than systems. So they're interested in, can you be trusted? Are you a con man? Are you a snake oil salesman? Do you have bad intentions in the village? And they are good judges of character. The magician energy, so the third one, the magician energy is the part of us that is the right brain, that likes color and creativity and poetry and walking into an astonishing building and being, wow, like the cathedrals, music, light shows, photographs that move us. The magician energy interested in solving problems, like how do we get the water from the stream up to the village so that we don't have to walk 5 kilometers 10 times a day, the light bulb, etc. So innovation and help me out. Oh, come on, brain. Innovation and people who create new technologies. But also the magician in us wants to create wonder for people. We like wonder. The magician knows that if you go to a comedy show and you have a good comedian and you laugh, you're going to be transported out of your left brain. If you go to a concert with lasers and smoke and epic speakers and glorious music, it's like all the to-do lists are gone. The boss who's complaining is gone. Whoever in your life is giving you stress is gone. In that moment, it's like wonder. That's what the magician energy creates, is available. And then the lover archetype is the part of us that seeks connection and empathy and compassion and consideration and gentleness. And it wants no thought. It's the part of us that wants to have no left brain, no boundaries, and wants to experience oneness, wants to drop out of all thought in hopefully either, whether it's the arms of your child, cuddling your dog on the couch, or lying in the arms of your beloved, and just dropping out of all thought and experiencing oneness. And essentially the lover archetype is sort of like I think of it as they are the gateway to the divine. So I speak about these because they are aspects of the human condition. We can be in our left brain, didactically rationalizing the systems of life. We can be in our left brain, being active, being ambitious, calling people out, holding people to account, checking and balancing wrongdoing is a big thing that the warriors deal with. But we can also drop out of all of that on a Friday night at a gig and drop into like music and whatever that creative realm is. And then there's also a part that I just described. So sometimes people confuse these. They think of them as male or masculine. It's not it at all. Like, all human beings have the capacity to be in our left brain, to be in our right brain, and to be in our body. The very fact that we are alive and conscious, immediately you know what I'm talking about. That Friday night at a gig was having a drink, and suddenly it's like having this wonder. But what's so fascinating is that we typically lean into one of these directions to survive life. Especially breakdowns. What I mean by breakdowns is fights, arguments, disconnections, cranky. Essentially, anytime you're out of sync. If you're in sync, it feels great. When you suddenly go out of sync, it doesn't feel great. Doesn't feel great at all, right? You're probably familiar in your own life.
And so when we talk about this, because this is really important at the moment, the way things are in the world, I think relationships, I think divorce has gone up huge amounts, and, you know, people are stuck with each other 24/7 and the whole lot of it. And it's a really important topic, I feel, at the moment, because, and I think we had mentioned this before, like, I do feel we live in a world where we're taught how to be in a relationship. Disney tells us what, a beautiful fantasy life it's going to be, and actually really the hard work comes after the honeymoon phase is over, and you have to then learn these coping mechanisms and these skills on how to coexist together in a beautiful relationship. But it's actually lovely what you're saying as well, because I always see things as positive and negative. Yes, they're positive and negative, but they're really only signposts back to something happier. And so there's actually a lot of nuggets of wisdom can be taken from those times of conflict, as you say, to learn what is your conflict style. Do you go into hiding mode? Do you prolong it? Do you blow up? Do you, do you revert back to childish ways? I would imagine to some end, there has to be some of our childishness that comes into our adultness. That wounded child perhaps comes out in our adultness. 100%. Have you kind of seen that?
100%, yeah. So as long as we're in our center and we are dealing with cortisol rather than cortisol dealing with us, then we get to be the adult version of us, at least the best that we've got as an adult. The moment that we lose our balance and lose our center and get knocked off balance by something, whether we're low resource from tiredness or hunger, or we've dealt with like a growing number of things that are irritating, like a parking ticket, missing the train, somebody bumping into us, like somebody not doing what they said they do, and it sort of slowly builds up and we just get less and less resources. It doesn't matter what it is. When we lose our center, we are essentially being the upset child that created the survival archetype in the first place.
So we resort essentially to our autonomic survival strategy, which is what you just said. Like, some people go mute and they disconnect or they flee. Some people speak right up and get very intense. Some people become very bossy and controlling. The gorillas become very bossy and controlling. I have to do it my way, and there's no fun and no humor, and you'll do it my way, and then maybe there'll be nice feelings back again. And the magician, they get slippery. The fox. So I described my survival archetypes as the gorilla is the sovereign energy. When the sovereign goes out of balance, they become gorilla-like, which is very bossy and controlling, essentially. And everybody has to do it their way, and then maybe we'll all have a nice time. The warrior, I think of, the imbalanced warrior energy is the wolf. They get aggressive and direct and heavy-handed and blunt, and they don't care about feelings, and they get right to it, which has its place, but it can mess with the village.
And when the magician gets out of balance, so I have it here in my diagram. So the sovereign is the gorilla, the warrior is the wolf, the magician is the fox. And the fox becomes very slippery. They won't give you a straight answer. They won't be responsible. You can chase them around all night trying to get them to admit something. They're not going to give it to you. Nope. Wasting time. And then the lover I talk of is the sheep. Now these are very archetypal. I was very clear sheep and wolf. And if you look around public lexicon, riddled throughout the Bible is talk of sheep and shepherds and wolves in sheep's clothing. Aesop, long before the Bible, in 65 BC, I think it was, or 600, I get confused, I've got to look it up. I think it was 60 odd BC. He bought himself out of slavery because he told stories about lambs and wolves and mice and lions. Excuse me, and there's very much in there, the sly fox, the cunning fox, cunning Mr. Fox. So we have inherently, intuitively recognized the nature of these particular animals in writings throughout the ages. And I came to them myself and then read Aesop's Fables. Oh God, of course. It's not complicated. Like sheep don't have teeth or fangs and growls. They bleat and they want to stay together in nice, warm, fluffy places. And they want to be together. And they don't want anyone to get cross with them. So those are the survival archetypes. And you would be mistaken if you're listening to this to think, well, that's a bit simplistic, calling them animal names. Oh, no, that would be a mistake. No, it's phenomenally powerful because you can explain it to kids. And it's like, as soon as I create this with my clients on my workshops, instantly people are, oh, my brother's a fox. Oh, my ex-husband, he was a wolf. That makes complete sense. No wonder I got confused. Oh, my husband's a sheep. Now it makes sense. That's why he wants to hug me when I get frustrated and I get really cross. It's very, very simple. It's not complicated, but it's incredibly powerful to understand. And these archetypes have dynamic tensions. So the gorilla and the fox, they often marry and they often get into relationships, but they operate from totally different worlds. The left brain, planning, precise, detailed, organized, predetermined mind of the gorilla, totally opposite to the fox. The fox wants everything to unfold. They like the flow. They don't want to commit to anything. Do you want to come out for a drink on Friday night? Oh, I'll let you know, said the fox. And the fox was like, what do you mean let me know? Is it yes or no? You can always change. Oh, I couldn't possibly tell you now. I don't know. I'm going to feel feelings on Friday night. And they argue differently and they need different things and they get reassured by different things. They get triggered by different things. And then they try and get married and have kids and live under one roof. And now we begin to see the problem and the solution. If you have a gorilla who's married to a fox or in a long-term relationship with a fox and they don't understand this, they drive each other crazy. And then it's just can I lower my expectations enough to survive this relationship? Because I don't understand my partner. And I've given up what I want, which is to be in sync, the way I want to be in sync. I've given up being in sync. So people have to give up a lot typically to survive when they're in a relationship with somebody they don't understand. The wolf and the sheep, it's the same. The wolf, they have to speak up. They literally cannot not speak up. If somebody's forgotten something, changed their mind, done something that doesn't work, or anything in the realm of wrongdoing, the wolf has to speak up. So my classic example is the wolf says to their partner, I really need you to pick up the package from the post office today. Yeah, no problem. The sheep forgets. Not their fault. Something happens, they don't do it. It's Friday night. The sheep's cooking dinner. There's going to be seduction and candles and wine. And the wolf is like, the package. You didn't pick up the package. Like, you have to pick. If I ask you, you've got to do it. Now I feel much better, said the wolf. Let's have a lovely evening. I can't wait to make love to you. And then she's like, what? Have a lovely evening? I can barely function. You just told me off. It's over. I can't. I'm not even in the building. So the sheep wants connection first. All the time, they'd rather not deal with the issue, hopefully ever. The wolf is like, I can't have connection until I've dealt with the issue. I can't relax with you. I have to speak. And they get into long-term relationships a lot as well. And there's very, very observable and almost universal impacts on wolves and sheep and gorillas and foxes. And the mistake would be to think this is too simple. No.
It's beautiful though. It's really, I can guarantee so many people are listening to this exactly as you've said, and they're like, I'm the sheep, I'm the fox, I'm the wolf, I'm the grit, you know. But what I'd love to know is if you're, two things that I'd love to know actually. So for those who are in a relationship of that dynamic, how can they start themselves even to edge towards creating a better relationship for themselves, because they may be married and have kids and not have the opportunity of being able to kind of escape that if it's not right for them. And then the second is for those who are not in a relationship, because I do feel we do attract people into our life. Polarity is one thing, but also we attract people into our life for things that I feel that we kind of need to see in ourselves, or as a way of kind of growing and becoming a better person, for ourselves and for other people. So I'd love to address both of those.
Everything you just said 100% is consistent with my findings. We typically attract somebody, an aspect of ourselves that we've disowned. And we typically attract somebody of a similar level of awareness and imbalanced potential as us. And we typically attract someone that's going to trigger the parts of us that we have to deal with. What's also observable is that I find that lots of people I've spoken to were once in a really beautiful relationship with almost no stress, but for some reason it ended. Not because anything was wrong. And then they end up falling in love and having this massively overwhelming urge to bond and marry and have kids with somebody who's unbelievably difficult for them. It all makes complete sense, because we haven't had a chance to touch on it, but you mentioned something earlier about growth by challenge. And I have a piece of work and a book that's coming, which I refer to simply as the game of life itself. So inside the health game and the relationship game and the money game and all of the subsidiary games that exist, what is the solar system that all of those games sit inside of? Like, what's the one game? What is the game of life itself that all the other games sit inside of? And it's essentially what you're touching on now and before, which is that the prime directive of life itself is maturation in nature and in our consciousness as humans. And therefore, maturation is important. So what is maturation in my mind? It's simply the act of gathering and integrating the awareness presented on our life path. And I think 85% or more of that is through challenges and breakdowns and failures and divorces and bankruptcies and being fired and losing all your money and losing your second soulmate. And that all sounds very depressing, but it's just the way the game is played. It's like I play rugby for 20 years, and it's like, if you describe rugby, so if you have the ball, they're going to try and run into you and knock you to the ground. Well, it doesn't sound like much fun at all, but actually it's a lot of fun. It's great. Can't get enough of it, actually. So it's kind of like you have to have a new relationship to the challenges of life. And I simply say that you should relate to breakdowns as your friend, because that's where the awareness is hiding inside that breakdown. And what most people want to do is they want to run off the path to the pub and get pissed and eat too much food and fall asleep. metaphorically speaking, but actually what we have to do is take our shovel out and dig for the gold. And the gold is awareness. And maturation is nothing more essentially than gathering the awareness presented through the challenges of our life. And we want to have a new relationship to breakdowns. And then you have a fighting chance of becoming an elder. And that, I think, is quite possibly the most, I could argue that motherhood is a contender for the most important role in your life, and fatherhood, of course. But I could raise a pretty good case for becoming an elder is the most important role of your life. And for me, my definition of eldership, if you're interested, is that you've lived a life, as we described, such that any member of the village from 3 to 93 can come and sit with you and share their deepest shame and vulnerability, and they trust your listening and they trust your response. Because you've lived a life that gives you the humility and the lack of judgment and the empathy to speak about the human condition in a way that is kind and understanding and non-judgmental, and hopefully wise.
And I feel that's something that's, I'm kind of always saying this, even when I'm talking kind of with people here, you know, and this is part of what Intrepid Wisdom is about, because I just feel that the family dynamic, the community dynamic, it's been very fractured over the last couple of years, and it's getting more and more fractured. And I feel that it's perhaps unfracturing a little bit. I think we're becoming more aware of it, and hopefully it'll kind of come back into balance all by itself. But with that is that role of elder. And, you know, years ago when we were in families that spent time together and lived together and grew and learned from each other, when we were in communities, because nowadays, like I'm not from where I'm living, I'm not from. And I'd say a lot of people, you know, when they're going off to college, they move away from home, they go to foreign lands, they, you know, that role of community is broken because now we can travel and we can go so far away. And so we're not actually living with those beautiful elders of our community who can teach us. And, you know, you go to some of the, you know, I spent time with some of the shamans in South America, and they're just solid. You know, they're passing on their shamanism from one generation to the other, their role of community. There is an elder in their community who they go to consult if they've got something going on or something wrong. And I do feel personally that we've lost that a little bit. And I just love that idea of becoming that elder. I just absolutely love that idea. And it is so true. And there's so many nuggets of wisdom to be found in the most difficult of times. In fact, that's when we grow. We have to have polarity to grow. If everything was hunky-dory and great, and, you know, how would we ever evolve? How would we ever meet ourselves to grow into something more different? But for people who are in relationships where it's seriously challenged, I'm assuming kind of from what you're saying is they can start with themselves by working on themselves. And as I said, I've actually seen this myself, and in my own research on relationships and how they work, I've seen where if you're going head to head and you're in a relationship and things are clashing and it's constantly not working for you and whatever, rather than trying to change the other person, start with yourself and see how can you have more compassion and understanding. And I think your archetypes of being able to understand these different archetypes can give you so much compassion for the other person. Once you've compassion for the other person and go, oh, they're a wolf, I get that now. That by itself, I can feel the load being lifted, because now there's an understanding, and with understanding is with compassion. So what else can people do to, you know, if somebody's in a relationship with addiction, for argument's sake, you know, if they change themselves, is that enough for the other person to then change as well? Or, you know, what's your experience?
I'm not going to comment on the addiction part, but let me comment on everything you just said. So 2 things that come to my mind, if I can continue to recall them. The first is, in my 34 years of being utterly fascinated by this material, by this subject, the full power of archetypal dynamics is the most powerful body of knowledge that I have discovered if you want to understand relationships. You can read any book you like. They're going to have some good stuff in them. Some of them are average. Some of them are really, really good. But I've not found anything that's more powerful than if you can take the time to understand the full power of archetypal dynamics and archetypal wisdom changes you forever in a better way. Because one of the aspects of the survival archetype is it's all encompassing. It's the only thing that we understand and see the world through. And then we don't understand other people. So I could go on, I could wax lyrical for days, which I do in my courses. The second piece, yes. What's the number one thing that anybody listening could do? You have to have a new relationship to breakdowns. And the most powerful thing you can do is sit down one day and say, okay, how do I behave when I get triggered? Does it work? And how long have I been doing it? And is there another way? You kind of want to have what the military call an after action review. After the action, review the action. Like, some people have exactly the same behavior for 30 years with their partner. It goes exactly the same way, just different detail. The answers are not the detail. So if I was to make one suggestion, like if I never work with you or speak with you, or if that's not meant to be, I would make one point and say, become curious about how you and your partner, but you in particular, do your breakdowns, and ask yourself, like, is there a better way? How effective do you really think you are when you're upset? Does it work? Are you thrilled with your progress so far and keen to do another 10 years of having upsets the way you have upsets? Is it really working for you? If you were to do that, you'd probably very quickly realize that there has to be a better way. There has to be a better way. Because everyone I work with, and I work with some very, very smart people, they very quickly realize this is not very smart, is it? No. And there's a more exquisite understanding that arises when you get to that point, which it wouldn't be appropriate for me to go into now. But the game of life points to the fact that there is one of the principles of the game of life is that there is an escalating feedback. The longer you live not gathering the awareness that's being presented and missed every time you have these breakdowns, the breakdowns get worse. And it ends up in, sometimes at best, it's divorce. At worst, it's a life of absolute misery, the Walking Dead. And we really want to try and avoid that. And there's one last thing that I wanted to say from what you were talking about, and I'm jumping around subjects. I hope that's okay. Yeah. And not in some kind of grandiose or significant way, but the path to eldership begins when you say it begins. Like, when would now be a good time for you to decide, okay, I'm going to become an elder? And all that does simply is it just makes you pay more attention to the awareness being presented. Because that's all you have to do is wake up in the morning and look for the awareness that is being presented through the experiences and feedback of your life. You can't wait until you're 60. So, I'll be an elder now. There's too much catching up to do by then, I'm afraid. It's now. And it's not something you go down the pub and say, oh yeah, I've committed to being an elder. No, it's subtle. It's private. You just say, while I'm here and seeing as I'm waking up tomorrow, I might as well do my best. Well, what's the most loving thing you can do for yourself and your partner? It's gather the awareness of the day. Learn your lessons for today. Become just a little bit more aware today than you were yesterday. And if you do that, then you might just become the best version of yourself that's possible in this lifetime. And you'll be way more fun and way more enjoyable to be around, and you'll be funny. And you'll probably win the money game, And there's a good chance you'll be healthy and vital into your later years. And you'll probably have a much bigger heart and a greater capacity for kindness, empathy, and compassion than you do today. So, yeah, the downside is you're probably going to have a much better life if you gather awareness. So, I don't know if I'm selling you on the idea.
I love the idea of the curiosity of it, because I think, when we're kids, before we get into the big bad world of being a serious, very serious adult, like kids are just so curious. Kids they want to know everything, even about themselves. And I think somewhere along the way, we just get really distracted, and it's that curiosity, that's what evolves us. And definitely the curiosity about it's not always easy to look at that aspect of ourselves to go, oh, well, I'm a really crap person when I'm like this. But it's not actually about being hard on yourself either. It's actually about giving yourself a break. It's about saying, okay, well, I don't really act well then, in this particular situation. How do I feel? And I think that's actually a really important part to it as well, is, if you don't know how to do this, check in. How do you feel? I feel crap. Why do I feel crap? I feel crap because I don't feel like I have control. Okay, why do you need to feel that you need to have control? I need to feel like I have control because I didn't feel it in 10 other relationships, and now I need to feel it in this one. And if it didn't work for you in 10 other relationships, then why are you still doing it? So I think it's these little bits of curiosity of asking ourselves questions. And I think for me personally, my own growth has come from, how do I feel? I want to feel better. So how do I feel? I feel bad. So how can I change that? I can't change it by making that other person say, make me feel better. I can only do it by doing that for myself. And you had mentioned as well, I remember you had said before, all any humans want is to be seen, to be heard, and to be understood. And those three really powerful things of being a human, if you can see that in yourself and see where you want to be felt as understood, heard, and seen, then the other person just wants the same. I think that would actually help with the going to loggerheads as well.
Yeah, and I think, thank you for reminding me of that. And I want to say two things. So firstly, the outcome of being seen, heard, and understood is two things. One is that you're made welcome, which is at the very core of our being. And the second part is that we're unshamed. It is almost impossible, unless you're a sociopath or have a serious mental illness, to get through childhood without carrying shame. And there's something about being seen, heard, and understood, especially by an elder who brings no judgment, that it is an unshaming and fundamentally healing experience to be seen, heard, and understood and made welcome. And I've forgotten the second part that I was going to say. That's exciting, isn't it?
What I was saying is that essentially it's just, I think the fact that, if you're seen, heard, and understood, that's all you want as a person, but then it's also what the other person wants. And if we can connect in with that, I just think that's such a valuable way to start and check in with your own feelings,
Yeah, beautiful. And I think the second thing I was going to say was, it's so pertinent in our times, the polarity that exists, that we're witnessing in America, for example, and the rise of identity politics. It's very interesting that I and other men and women who I think of as human developers, we have an aversion to labels. We have an aversion to being labeled anything. Because the guiding principle should not be what your family votes or what political party you're supposed to believe in. The guiding principle is what is appropriate. And what's appropriate is typically kind and benevolent and well-meaning and for the betterment of all. And that should be the guiding principle of it. It is the guiding principle of anyone that I am interested in. So I think that it makes life so much easier when you're just a human being. And it sounds like a cliche, but it's really not meant to be. It's like, I have a lot of friends in America. So it's very interesting to observe. Like, they can't talk about politics on their Facebook feed because people are going mad. People are going nuts. And, like, it's a really simple thing. Photographs of Los Angeles in the 70s and photographs of Los Angeles today, no one in their right mind would vote for somebody that would repeal the Clean Air Act. This shouldn't be a discussion. It really shouldn't be a discussion. And yet we find ourselves unable to see and hear and understand each other because the world's going just a little bit mad. Mm. But I have faith in the next generation. I think so often people assume that the last generation had it best and the next the last generation had it best and the next generation are really going to struggle and it's all going to shit in the handbasket, excuse my French. Nah, they've been thinking like that every generation for hundreds of years. It's normal. The golden years are behind us. It's all going to pieces. New technology is going to ruin everything. I don't have any concerns about the next generation. If anything, I think they're going to solve the majority of the world's problems because I think they're so much more advanced than any generation in the history of mankind. We can just pull a device out of our pocket and put in a search term and find the research of the smartest people in the world on that particular subject. Within 2 hours, you can become essentially what for the whole of time be an expert. Let's just say jealousy. You're interested in jealousy. In 2 hours, you can read the most refined understanding of jealousy from the top minds who've dedicated their lives to that. You can find it in 0.74 seconds, and you can spend 2 hours reading and become an expert on jealousy, almost like that. It's never happened before in the history of mankind. So I think that the next gen, excuse me.
And what I was going to just to add to that was I also feel that this is where the eldership side comes in, because when you consider, like, it's definitely great that we can read so much and we can learn so much and it's at our fingertips, but I still personally feel there's nothing like human to human interaction. And actually the greatest learning and the greatest growth I feel comes from that human to human interaction. You can read in a book on how to resolve an argument for argument's sake, but unless you're with somebody in person, you're never going to experience what that's like, and therefore you're never going to be able to implement it and be able to grow from that. So while it's great to be able to learn all these things, I definitely feel, there's for argument's sake at the moment, there's a woman in Ireland, I think she's 107. I read about her the other day. Her name is Nancy Stewart, I think. And her attitude to what's going on at the moment is just like, it's fine. I've been through so many hard times before, and, life is difficult, and I, have seen wars and recessions and whatever. And I've said this before in another podcast I did, where if your best friend who's the same age as you, who's on the same level as you, turns around and goes, it'll be fine, it's going to be fine, it's okay. You're like, how the hell do you know? If your elder who's been there and done that and bought the t-shirt as such, but they've been through so many times of hardship before, says, do you know what, sweetheart, it's actually going to be okay, because I've seen it and everything actually recovers eventually. And, how nurturing is that to your soul? So I think you can read it in a book to a certain extent, but definitely there's nothing like somebody who's really been, and that's what Intrepid Wisdom is about. It's about connecting with real people, in real lives, to be able to show people that, this is possible, growth is possible, change is possible. And what you're doing is exactly that to its own end. You're showing people that change is possible, growth is possible. You're not stuck. You don't have to stay stuck. You can if you want, but that's a decision ultimately.
Yeah. Two quick things, because then we're going to wrap up shortly. My father's a military historian who studied 20th century history in detail. It's like, this ain't bad at all. Whatever we think we're dealing with, it's nothing.
That's it.
Just go and study your 20th century history.
Yeah.
And you'll know what suffering is. It's like, we're living in a charmed life. There's some people writing lies on the internet.
Yeah.
That's about as bad as it is.
Yeah.
And there's a guy in the White House right now. We're not going to talk about him.
Yeah.
But I think at the end of the day, so let's summarize. Yeah. What do you have? The only thing you really have control over is you. And the most loving thing you can do for yourself and the people that you care about is to render yourself more conscious, which is to gather the awareness presented today. And realize that you're not supposed to stay the same that you are now in 10 years.
Yes.
You know, if you have a serious problem and you're going to go and speak to somebody in their 70s, but they have the same thoughts, beliefs, and opinions they had in their 30s, would you want to go and sit with them? Not a chance. There's no, instantly you're like, no, that's wrong. That doesn't feel right. So what does that mean? It says we want to continue to expand our understanding of the human condition.
So if people wanted to...
And have as much fun along the way, like that's the point. Like, you know, don't stop being a mischievous rascal. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
You want to continue to be a comedian. It's not all, you know.
And stay curious, totally stay curious. Yeah.
I think life's hilarious. The older I get, the funnier I think life is. Like, it's a joke. It's a cosmic joke, most of it.
So if people wanted to get in contact with you, if they want to know more about some of the courses and workshops that you do, how can they get in touch? What's the best way? Well,
as a special gift to anybody that's watching this podcast, if you would like to speak to me personally about my work and how I work, I'm very happy to have a call with you. So we'll make sure the link to my calendar is in the call. I'd be very happy to meet you. It's a free call. It would just be nice to meet you. Say that I was on the Intrepid Wisdom Podcast and I'm accepting your invitation for a call. But if you go to my webpage, Relational Power Dynamics, and we'll make sure that link is there as well, relationalpowerdynamics.com, the main research into archetypal dynamics and how the full potential of archetypal wisdom is a course called The Balance of Power. And it's an online course now because of COVID. It's my 3-day workshop that I led in November last year. And there's a workbook. I can grab my workbook. There's a workbook that you can use. And I regularly create study groups where, for no extra charge, if you sign up for the workshop, you can be part of a study group because this material lends itself to speaking to other people. And there's weekly calls, the workbook, and there's also some pod calls. So I've created a system that is incredibly powerful because I really care about results. I'm not here to entertain people. I'm here to produce legitimate and measurable results in people's lives and dramatically speed up their understanding of themselves and in particular relationships, but really archetypal wisdom affects every single aspect of your life for the better.
Yeah, I would say definitely anybody who wants to know more about relationships to check that out. I will say from watching a free video of yours, I actually grew a lot by that video itself. We had a call going back a long while ago, and in that 30 minutes call, I will say for you, Rory, you're so human. You're not out to sales pitch a course, and it's not like a hard sell. All you're doing is sharing your wisdom and your research, and it comes across really clearly in all that you do as well, which I think actually is really beautiful because you're just so determined to share your wisdom. So anybody who's anyway curious, go check out the website. I'll put the links below. Have that chat with Rory. You would be absolutely crazy to pass up that opportunity. I'm telling you now, even if you just have relationship queries in general. And I'll stick that below. So thank you so much for coming on.
Such a pleasure.
Such a pleasure.
Such a pleasure.
For those of you who...
I just wanted to say that I get invited to do podcasts quite regularly, and I'm not able to do them all. But when I read your description and what you're doing and the intention behind your podcast, I had to accept your invitation. It's been a pleasure. And I hope and I wish that you continue doing the good work that you're doing.
Thank you so much. That means so much. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And for those who are listening to the podcast or watching the video, don't forget to like, comment, share, and let me know that you care. To stay up to date, hit the subscribe button and the bell to receive notifications for podcast links and for Rory's beautiful free gift. Check out the intrepidwisdom.com website and be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram. And if you're happy to support the show, there's now a donate button on the website as well. So in the meantime, stay curious. Thank you.